forum is 0307 on 23rd of April 2024. This is just a work session for the Houseless Lift Advisory Board.
So what I kind of want to do is, for right now, is maybe throw some principles up, like, because we're dealing with this whole idea with homelessness, right? And I want us to just be solution oriented. That and some of it, I wish I had wrote down some of the stuff that was on that board that day that was in there.
Well, I think we can start. I'm looking at what you texted. You know, it says safety first, not housing first. The thing is, I think we have to have a clear understanding of what housing first is, because what they projected housing first is here, like, you know, under the basic terms, is not how this model of just putting people in housing without any type of assessment. That's not housing first. Housing first is housing with the appropriate support.
So it's a process. Current use by the muni is not correctly applied.
Yeah, right. And I don't know if I'll say, you know, yeah, I guess I don't know if the muni is. I think just people in general. The public in general doesn't understand.
How about this?
Housing
current use.
Current understanding of use.
In the muni. It's not. It's all the city is not applying correctly.
And then it's not educated and it's not shared with the public accurately.
We drew a timeline or a line, a process line, and in this right here is current. This is not non-Henning, right? We have to make that clear. This is non-Henning. Currently, they start right here with housing, and then they work on milestones. So they try to do they do the same thing, milestone to milestone. So then they try to get you into some kind of a service, and they try to get you with this, and they try to do that. What we're trying to get to is the real housing first model, which is, what did we say this very first step was?
So I wasn't there in the beginning.
Okay, so I think this one was like emergency shelter.
So and that even within right there, everything you wrote. So even like housing, like shelter is housing. Transitional housing is housing.
So let's just say that it's 85 below zero, and somebody, we just got to get them into someplace safe, right? Maybe a warming tent. Should I just like
under building?
Under building?
Yep.
Okay. I'll just have to correct the terminology if you're not using it right.
Sure.
Under building. And then we said it was like triage.
Yeah, assessment.
Okay.
After you've done the assessment, you can do the right intervention. Sometimes that intervention is treatment. Sometimes that intervention is resume building. Sometimes that intervention is mental health evaluation.
Okay.
And then from there, we transition to the appropriate permanent housing.
Okay.
So it's assessment. That's the kind of the tool that we use, that I've grown to use, is assessment, intervention, transition.
And program enrollment, I'm just going to put that, might be a subcategory of this one.
Sure.
But transition to housing.
Yep.
To stable.
Yeah.
And so
Stable
they're
housing,
starting
that's
here. They are putting this one right here.
Right.
And then they've got this thing flipped like that.
Right.
They're going backwards. They should be working to housing, and housing first should be your first step to long-term success. Not let's get them into housing first.
Right.
They misunderstood that because of the words used. It's when you misapply a name.
Yeah.
And They need to be shown this.
Yeah, and they were showing it today. Today, when we spoke at the press conference, it was laid out. It's like, listen, because one of the editor from ADN was like, hey, if this is stood up, if this how is it going to affect the Housing First model? I was like, okay, well, let me tell you what the Housing First model was supposed to be. So when Houston came up here, their exact words, it's like housing individual doesn't.
Were there assembly members in that your meeting this morning? Which ones were there?
Zach,
Karen Braga,
and
Meg
Meg was there for a little while.
And was Meg there for this?
She took off right after you did the count and costs.
Yep.
Yeah, I heard this big wow.
She was not happy.
No,
Okay.
she wasn't.
Did you guys touch on functional zero?
No.
Okay. So housing first is like one of the big things, so it's a process. The other one here is measurables, as far as measuring success, right?
So like key performance indicators, basically.
Yeah.
So functional zero is one they don't tell people a lot about. And I'll tell you, if you go onto onto YouTube and you type in functional zero, the only examples of functional zero you're going to find are ones where they say, okay, let's take veterans, because it only works with veterans as far as making an example out of it, but it doesn't work as a measurement. So functional zero, they're using functional zero as a measurement of success when it isn't. It's an evaluation of effectiveness, meaning that if you can create a bed and you can put somebody in it as fast as you create it, you're 100% efficient with that particular process. In functional zero, when they do veterans, there's only a certain number of veterans. It's actually a finite group.
Right.
But men and women, there are births all the time, and there's always either a boy or a girl, right, being born. So if you did it, you couldn't use functional zero with men or women because it's an unending pool. But veterans is a very limited pool that you only have a certain number of that enlisted, or it's a finite group.
So maybe we also need to have, when we do this, a definition page, because their definition page is different than I think the reality.
So what in this presentation to the assembly, what's the objective?
One is the principles, and we want to kind of drive the message that supports what you guys did today, what we were talking about on Friday, which is these are the foundational elements of what will make a successful strategy for combating homelessness. You're on the application side. You're saying, look, if you're going to apply something and put it into action, this is what you do. I want to get us back that up with, this is the philosophy you use, and I want to reinforce to them things that they're doing wrong, even if we have to tell them again on the public record, not just the media record, and talk to them about what they're measuring and how they're measuring it, and that they're wrong for doing that, but not just doing that, but providing and saying, this is how you should be measuring what's going on. So like for functional zero, they have to understand why that term, if you ever hear it, or if they're using it behind the scenes, which they are,
Yep.
why that's a false.
I get it, but honestly, like even if you explain to them why they're wrong in this, we're gonna get pushback like you wouldn't believe. So the thing that I would hate to see is us put in all this work just to go up there for an argument.
And I don't think we are, but I do think that we can write some of this in a narrative, so some of this will be translated into document. If we only get 3 minutes or 5 minutes to speak as one of the boards, then this is going to have to be like boiled down to some boilerplate things.
Okay.
I think we need to approach them to say, look, I know that we've been many years, this is how much we've spent. We've done a lot of things in this community that aren't effective. Here are things that we think are required in order to have a sustained, successful strategy going forward. There is a model out there that you haven't been tapping into much, and support the model. We can give them written documentation and supply that as reading behind the scenes for them, and
Because I think because if you go back to just today and look at some of the stuff that we put up there, it's going to spell out a lot of things. Like we put up like the cost per day per person, how much it is according to their stats. It's $85 to $100 per person to shelter someone experiencing homelessness. But according to our data, as operators for the emergency shelter for the last 2 years, it's $40 to $60 a day. And
Does that include food
it's everything. That's the whole entire operation of running the shelter.
and security?
Everything.
Wow.
And the public should hear some of this stuff again, even on the record, that their cost in 2019, since just pre-COVID, and then
Their numbers are on the Coalition in Homelessness is on the website.
Yeah.
It's saying that
They-
it's
yes.
since 2019.
right now. Like
Right.
their
We need to
latest updated.
screenshot some of that.
Yeah, and then I want to break it down per person.
So yeah,
What's the number of homeless they think are on the streets right now?
3,289.
Okay, so
Meg Zalatel said that at the last meeting that I attended
and
that I notified you about. She
Um,
said it 2 times.
So here's the thing: do they know what the homelessness numbers are in Fairbanks, Bethel, Dillingham, any of those other cities? Because if they don't,
Do you know?
they should.
Not off the top of my head, but I've seen them. The numbers are available.
yeah, they're under HUD. HUD's got all that data on their dashboard.
So it would be interesting to like reach out to those communities and ask them if, let's just say they say there's 112 people on the streets of Bethel. Well, are they in tents like they are here, or are they just couch surfing?
So
And they're applying for a program and they don't have a home? And
Right.
the couch surfer, I don't want to count couch surfers. I want to separate the couch surfing, I don't have a home right now, from the inebriates that are on the streets. Because they're different classes of people. I got a lot of relatives that are couch surfing,
Sure.
and they are homeless. They're without
Right.
a home. So they got a
Yeah.
place to sleep. They're not addicted on addiction. They're just,
It's hidden homelessness.
Yeah.
That's the word. But so we did a deep dive on on every other cities, what their cost per person per day is, and the range is pretty similar. Like we get everything between $60 to all the way up to $135 per day. And then we looked at what cities that were on the higher end, or like that are 120, 100, that are similar to the coalition's numbers. And, the thing it was the big cities, Portland, San Francisco.
Yeah.
Then you get the smaller condensed populations like Anchorage, and you're looking at between $60 and $80, same as what we were saying. So all this data we have, because Brian Lucas, she's a data scientist, and so she's looked up a lot of this stuff that we can definitely utilize with whatever presentation. So like if we're looking like we can utilize this time to find out, to get like an ask of like what data do we want, and I could easily bring that to Ryan in another work session or whatever, and she would have that up, just bing, 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 bing. 'Cause I know dipping into data isn't my specialty, but I know that it is.
so this stuff here was the San Francisco data that I want to bring into it. That showed that, so San Francisco has a program that used Housing First. They gave out a certain amount of money every day, like $50 a day, $56 a day, give them food. They provided them lodging at hotels, apartment complexes they were buying up. After 3 years, they only had 20% recidivism, meaning 20% of the people went back into being on the streets after 3 years. And they were touting success. But when the investigation started to look back, when you went back 8 years, 75%
Yeah.
were
Back
either on the streets, dead, or incarcerated. And so when you extended it a little bit, you saw that it wasn't effective long term. It was It was creating the situation where it wasn't there. The other thing was, the LA data showed when it came to navigation centers that we use a description of a shelter when talking about the word navigation center. When you talk about navigating, it's very different than when they talk about navigating, because they're talking about sheltering. The thing with the LA data is it showed that shelter or navigation centers that handled more than 100 people at a time started to decrease in effectiveness. And those that, or when they went more than 100, when they dealt with 100 or less, especially when you got closer to 50 people or less, they had higher rates. They had actually very successful rates navigating people. So the idea, when the mayor says, I want a 1,000-person navigation center, or I want a 500-person navigation center, or even a 250, those size navigation centers they're still bigger than anything that LA had said was doable long-term.
But navigation center is different than housing in my eyes. Navigation center, again, it comes down to definitions, because a navigation, most of these people cannot make decisions for themselves. They don't know exactly what they need or what they want.
So,
And
The navigation center comes in here, though.
But here's the thing too. Even with the idea of 1,000 shelter, that's not even an idea that's being kicked around anymore. It was scaled down to 200 to 500, but after the 200, like going up to 500, because we don't have any other buildings for emergency shelter. Now 200, we could successfully navigate.
You could do that.
We can-
and I think in this town, because we've proven how big you can get and try to navigate with a
We
large
can
number.
navigate 500. That definitely is asking too much.
I believe that they never saw how to successfully get over 100. We were forced to deal with 500, 700, 800 and try to navigate. And as that number went down, once we started to get around 400, we were able to kind of grip and churn through that. But
What
they
we
never saw
know
it.
is about, if you have 500 people under a roof, about 200 of them are really ready.
Yeah.
The rest are, that's why the assessment is very important. You have to continually reassess. So a navigation center does two functions. One, it navigates people to appropriate space, but it also creates emergency shelter for people that would be freezing outside. That's the difference here in Anchorage than LA or San Francisco, because we have harsh conditions that require people to be able to go under building.
Okay. So
And that's a much better definition than what I think we're using right now.
yeah, and
Or what the assembly wants to
and the NAP
apply.
centers have a certain number of beds, but it's not for permanent housing. It's really to get them in a
Yeah,
emergency
yeah,
situation.
Right.
And the ones, how they do it in Houston, now that, once they got to a space where they were able to bring down the numbers, and they still have this building where they're navigating people, but it's people who already have been assessed even outside.
Yeah, they've already got this part done.
And so they get a bed because they're in this process.
Yeah, they've gotten this far, and then they get this emergency shelter. Well, the one thing that's missing and all this stuff, but we had talked about it, and we laid this big plan out when I was in the mayor's office, was we were using the faith community here.
Yeah.
And it was so we were going to incorporate use of all the churches that wanted to volunteer and be a part of it. And through code, there was going to be a code modification, and they could have up to 5 people per church. And the church would they'd be eligible for micro grants.
Yep.
And the micro grants would allow them to bring them in for some of this emergency sheltering while they're going through this process, so that it wasn't all on the NAP center. And if you had 15 churches, each one with the capacity to go 5 or 8 people, right? But the church would have to supply the volunteers, the place to wash their clothes, have some place for them to shower, those kind of things, the cots. But they get these micro grants to cover those costs, but they could be putting it toward their mission. That if you had 15, that's 150 people to 200 people you could pull off the streets with the churches. And all the churches were asking to be a part of it.
That's a great idea.
But they could do it in pieces, small pieces, and you're spreading that number out.
I remember, do we have a lot of people respond, a lot
Yeah.
of churches responding?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well-
Lutheran came up with pallet program.
Well, I know Lutheran has always
Yeah.
been.
And they can be one of the pieces here, and the micro grants were tiny, and it wasn't intended to fund them or anything like that. It was like they were gonna do it, most of the churches were willing to do it at their expense for small, as long as they weren't gonna get in trouble, they could meet the fire code requirements without having to,
Right,
all that stuff that we had brought the fire chief in.
right.
The thing that the only thing I'm worried about, because, I have worked with 3 different churches that do pretty good as far as outreach goes, but there's still, some are still pretty inequipped.
So here's the.
Maybe we need a training program for them.
We do, but I think that the way you bring them in is you don't have, what you don't do is create this is what you don't do. We don't create the muni over here and then put like Henning here and the churches here. I think what you have to do, like where the muni is running the program, that's the wrong thing to do. I think what you do is the money comes here to like Henning, and then off of that is your program with the churches. Henning would provide the training, Henning provides the expectations, they're the contractor, and they go out and recruit the churches. When there is a micro grant that needs to be given for the number of beds, Henning sends that information up, and it can be paid directly from ACEH or from the muni, wherever that source of funds is, so that it doesn't have to pass through here.
Yeah.
And in that process, as part of managing this, part of the financial resource that comes to Henning supports this part right here. So if $100 is allocated per bed, or let's say $75 is allocated per bed, 25 might come to Henning to manage that program and to oversee it and train and do all that, and make sure that they're adhering to it, because you have to go and inspect and make sure that everything's cool, and then the other 50 goes to the church for.
And they're only doing a portion of it. They're only doing like maybe the laundry. They're not doing the stuff that like getting the IDs
Right.
or
They're just providing
or
a safe
assisting
space.
with it's just a temporary safe space.
No, that's good. Like
That's a great
It's a
idea.
start.
it would be, and then that way through a service provider that would govern that process, then we could keep data. We could tap into
Yes.
the HMIS system, so we can keep track of KPIs basically.
Right.
The other thing on this list was understanding that for the assembly to hear these things, that they often just off the cuff say, well, all these people on the streets have mental health issues. You gotta fix that.
I have some ideas on that.
And they may have had mental health issues today, but most of them, if you went back 15 years, 20 years, they didn't have mental health issues. What happened? Well, in some cases it was drugs, in some cases it was trauma, in some cases, the smallest percentage was, you don't just have all of these people of the same race all of a sudden have mental health issues. It didn't just come about like they all got it. Why is it that 75 or 80% are all Alaskan Native that have mental health issues? It's not. Did you think that proportion is humans? You're right. And it's like, I don't know how many, it's like Caucasian makes up like 6 or 7% of those on the street. So when you look at it, when I was a trooper, I met a lot of people that had meth-induced schizophrenia. They were
Yeah.
schizophrenic from meth.
Yes.
And they were always all over.
Yes.
And so to have that, to know that that is a cause, we need to correct them to quit saying that it's terrible to just apply that mental health issue as the cause for them being on the street.
You're right.
See, I will say this though, because I've been in these battles for a lot, and what happens is they're going to fight you no matter what on it, and then we spend our time arguing, and I'm just like, I'm done arguing, I got work to do, and then we just put all this beautiful presentation for nothing because there's no changing their mind in this regard. So we can.
I think we should try because there's some new folks.
I encourage you guys to try it. I'm just saying I won't. I wouldn't be up there arguing that case. I would talk to them one-on-one, like in smaller settings, but presenting this.
And maybe it's not what ends up getting presented,
Yeah.
but if we can agree that these are the salient points, because at some point, what we say in our 5 minutes, or 2 people get up and each gets 5, that will have to be succinctly orchestrated right and be based in fact and,
No, and I would
Non-argumentative.
support,
Yeah.
I would support giving you guys whatever information you need, but I'm just not willing to go on that hill, for that.
okay. The other part is, the APD piece of it, APD accountability. So, now with this one, there's a couple things. We know that there was a business owner that had the vehicle broke into and APD didn't do anything about it.
Not just a business owner, I mean, it's a conglomerate. That, to me, that was huge.
Yeah,
Because I mean, I've been going to the 56th shelter a lot. And, you know, we've got so many potentials that we're not utilizing. It just,
Is this needing to be recorded? Like, on record? Okay. Yes.
so APD accountability.
Do we want to run through what happened with that situation?
maybe later.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm
So-
not gonna run off.
So the other thing about APD accountability is this. I know, and right now the Supreme Court is dealing with the issue of whether or not you can clear out camps. But here's what I think in terms of, I'm gonna talk specifically about the hill that goes down by Saturday Market. And photographs that were today of people camping that Terry Drake had put into the, in the tunnel there.
Yeah, that was over on Tozier
Oh my
Track.
goodness.
That's where the guy was.
The walkway?
Yeah,
Oh, that was over on Tozier?
yeah, that guy
So-
way back there's kind of started with that. Right?
Okay, so here's the deal. Those are life and safety issues for the individual, but they're also safety issues for the public. They can't use that, right? APD has to be held accountable. If it's reported to the mayor and APD doesn't do something about it, let's say it's reported to APD and they do nothing about it. Or they say, the Supreme Court ruling. They're not calling the DA or getting legal advice, they're just making a call. And they shouldn't be the ones that get to just wave that off. The APD accountability starts at the mayor's office. The position I have is, if they aren't doing their job and they're not going through all the legal channels and running this through all the way to the state attorney general and having him check through it and using it, then you fire her. Bottom line is, we can't be afraid to stand up for right and wrong, and as much as I believe in the police and respect what they do coming from that profession, I've watched so many times not following through with something like this, or afraid to act, or thinking without double, triple checking and verifying. If we take the hill down there by Saturday Market, you have the public coming, you have kids, there's needles, drugs, disease down that hill. That is a public safety hazard. That hill gets cleared off today. And I would be the mayor saying, get this thing cleared off. APD, you're not gonna do it. I'll see if my parks people can do it. We'll get you the hazmat suits. You have to have the equipment. The other thing is that we dealt with this last year was the equipment, where they weren't equipping people with the right, like the parks folks,
Oh,
were out there clearing all the stuff,
Yeah.
and they don't have any kind of protective gear on.
Yeah.
No Narcan either.
None.
I've walked around those camps, nothing but needles.
Yeah, and so to me, so the only way you can clear camps in lieu of this court ruling is if there's a public safety issue. So there is one, but we don't act. So we choose to not do anything. And
From what I've heard this summer, I don't know, maybe it's not true, but that they're gonna be in full force downtown. There won't be anyone homeless in the streets of downtown.
Yeah, I've heard that rumor too.
I've heard that, and I don't know how true that's gonna be, but I heard that there's a zero tolerance for it this summer.
well, I don't know why we're waiting till summer.
Yeah,
That's terrible right now. That's the whole thing.
yeah,
What if Mayor Bronson, if he's the one claiming it,
yeah.
well, who's giving the executive order? Because mayor could be out, and then you got a new mayor, and would the new mayor support it? And if APD's saying it, where's it coming from? Because I would say that,
So, yeah, I'm just saying from conversations I've been in, I don't know how true that is.
and why would they wait?
Yeah,
And I guess that would be the question I'd ask back. Why are you waiting?
yeah,
The plan is go do it now. Because why are we waiting until people start showing up?
Yeah.
You drive by that hill right now, it is disgusting. Right now on that hill, I don't even know.
Why are we only doing it when the tourists are supposedly here?
Yeah, right.
Why are we not doing it for our people? And these are good questions.
So yeah, those would be good follow-up questions when they say, because that's what they'll say, hey, we're gonna have low tolerance, da, 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 da. And you're like, okay, well, what about when it's not?
There was a model that was put out, where the epicenter of downtown would be a no tolerance zone. In these zones where you just wouldn't, you don't let them loiter, you don't tolerate camping, sleeping, none of that stuff. And there's too many people in an urban setting. When you concentrate to your city center, you have a lot of people. So when you have disease of the mind or disease of the physical, and you're bringing that all in, you have the potential of contaminating a lot of people. So on a health safety thing, to me, you draw these lines. If you can get it dispersed and get it spread out, you're not going to have the same impact. But we had the same problem we had Beans and Brother Francis.
Well, I tell you, this year, last year at Third Negro, there was over 200 something people there. That's not going to be there this year. Cuddy Park, there's 200 some people. That's definitely being debated. And so if they say that, if what they say is true, and there's not going to be anybody downtown, you best believe Midtown and the edges of South Anchorage.
They have to know where they're going
to be
They don't.
in trouble.
I've already seen about 15 camps along not Chester, but Campbell Creek. Underneath
That's
the
good, just
bridges
keep
all the
going.
way from.
We hit 15 the other day.
Yeah, well, I've done almost
And
all Campbell Creek.
the amounts of trash in the trees and stuff is absolutely, if that's not a biohazard
Well,
in our forests,
Well, I've already been talking to the Waterways Council.
we should be getting these people some grants. If there's this much money in housing the homeless, we should take some of this money and get grants to get the homeless back to work to cleaning it up.
There isn't
Well,
money
I
like
know.
it is.
There's
It's
no
just
money
been
right now.
money wasted.
Yeah, I know.
Exactly.
So there isn't no
The
money.
grants in this
Literally,
year, don't they?
there's grants, but as it stands right now, as long as that the numbers they show, that is $100 per person per day, and that's the money that they're budgeting for all the service providers that receive any kind of money. Until that number changes and that gets right sized, there ain't going to be enough. There's not enough money out there for people. But again, that's the thing. The questions that got to be like, okay, we know that there's not going to be a camping allowed 3rd Avenue. We know camping's not going to be allowed at Cuddy. And you say that camping's not going to be allowed downtown. Where are they going?
That leaves city parks and bike trails.
Right.
That's it.
Exactly.
There's nothing else. And the Waterways Council's kind of getting in on this now too, because of the amount of honey buckets I saw dumped into the streams last year.
That's not
Oh,
good.
well over 100 of them.
That's not
And it's
good.
going to happen again this
Yeah.
year.
There's
It's gonna be-
no floating Campbell Creek
So
anymore.
last year when they
That's
emptied out the Sullivan,
Yeah.
not
These
everybody
are
went to Third
impacting your
Yeah.
children that don't play at the
Everybody went to
parks.
Cuddy, but that's not there this year.
No, either one of them.
So it's
And Cuddy's heinous. It's apocalyptic.
Yeah,
there
there's-
seems to be
and
burned out
that's-
vehicles and tents and camps.
right, and that's I think June 1st is the date.
How do you deal with the detoxing these people? So a lot of them I've seen, in fact, everyone I've talked to the past 2 weeks, not a single one of them is sober.
Yeah.
It's,
I mean, how-
I mean, we got one of the things that we have done, and you know how I feel about drugs, we have taken videos, because whenever I talk to anybody associated with MEG or ACEH, what I'm hearing is that we don't have these issues. They're really not that bad. It's more this, and I'm learning a lot from you, Rob.
Yeah.
But,
Who was the KTE, was it KTE that was interviewing this morning?
they were there.
Yeah, it was.
ADN was there too.
Who was the KTE reporter?
Yeah.
Was
So
it
Gal,
Gal?
wasn't it?
I don't know.
Long hair Gal. I didn't catch her name.
Who was it? I can't even remember. I'm so tired. I can't remember. But I know the ADN's editor was there. Got his name.
I put here, we need to find out what the homelessness numbers are for Fairbanks, Juneau, Ketchikan, Bethel, and get a ratio of the number of homeless per the city's population, and compare that to Anchorage. What about, I also want to identify the magnets.
we should probably assign homework as well.
Yeah, so this is stuff we gotta, some magnets, like what are the things that attract people to Anchorage
Medical
Do you know-
for
care.
homeless
You know-
that
you
are
know what's-
causing their.
You know what
coming to-
started it? You know what started, you heard of the blue ticket?
Yeah.
That was the beginning of it.
Okay, but I,
Oh, yeah, for
so
the
I,
villages.
but hold on, I hear that.
Mhm.
I've heard that a couple times this week, but only about 5% of the tribes have the legal ability to do a blue ticket.
Right.
And only about 3 tribes in Alaska utilize the blue ticket.
So it's not that the utilization of it, just the ideal. The ideal permeated, like, oh, hey, you know what we've done? This is what we've done.
Should be Anchorage.
Yeah.
But we're talking about, well,
And also Anchorage, of course, we're the big city. It's the most transient, people can walk, bus, and get from place to place a lot easier than any other city in the state. There's more resources here. There's more family members here that are collective, like they can be from 5 different boroughs or 5 different villages, but all live in Alaska or Anchorage. So I mean that's kind of the same thing with all big cities. Portland, same thing. LA.
so so I know that these are potential contributing factors, like DOC moves people here and then they release them, and then they'd rather take the cash than have them buy a ticket and go home. They just stay here because they get $500 or $800. And THC brings people here for medical, and sometimes the person is the patient, sometimes it's the family of the patient. And if they're drinking and partying with relatives, the rest of the family goes home, that person doesn't travel with them, and THC won't buy their ticket back. They have to travel as a group. Or they came here, they needed treatment, they might have already had an opiate issue going on, or they just have relatives that stay, and they leave this open-ended ticket that can only be used to fly home, and after a certain amount of time, there's no reason to go back. So medical can sometimes get them here. North Star, sometimes they're picked up, they're passing through or something like that, they're here for another reason. They end up going to North Star, get a 72-hour hold, and then they're kicked loose. At that time, oftentimes family's gone, resources are here.
And I mean resources, not just like positive resources.
Negative.
I'm talking negative
You're
resources
right.
too.
You're right.
Because once you're in that system, once you're addicted or you have some type of substance abuse issue, it's going to affect 10 people, and those 10 people are going to affect 10 people, and so now you've got a cohort of people who maybe they get sober, maybe they don't, but they're traveling back and forth from wherever they go, picking up more people, and
That's how they support their habits.
But I think here's a big one. So, Anchorage, 20% of our population is Samoan or Polynesian, and 20% of our population in the city is Alaska Native. So those 2 groups make up about 40% of the city's population. There is a lot that I can speak to culturally, that when it comes to the lack of access to your fishing and your hunting, and the role of a male role model when you're coming from a cultural environment where that is the role of the male, is to go out there and be a hunter-gatherer.
Mm-hmm.
When you don't have fish, I would be tracking, right now, we haven't fished along the Kuskokwim and the Yukon rivers for a while. And caribou herds are changing in Bristol Bay and up on the northwest. So we need to look at data that shows, and it's out there because this guy Tom Harris
The
has it.
cultural impacts.
When you reduce that ability for them to do that, they're coming to the city seeking, because there's nothing back in their community, and they're seeking jobs, and they're coming here. People live here. You have family that's already here. You couch surf, and you just get wrapped up in the wrong circles.
That is absolutely huge.
And I
It
think
should
that's
be
the bigger-
one of your number 1 bullets,
That's
because
it.
that's a huge impact. Maybe we need to have
They're
somebody
coming
from,
here because it's a city, and there's nothing back home.
because they've taken it away.
It's just gone, right? Why stay? So I'm coming, whether you're here as a single person or as a part of a family unit. But you get here and you just fall into.
I can tell you, like, just from my experience, like, take Tyonek, for instance. I've sponsored 6 guys from Tyonek, and those 6 guys have, throughout the years, gone back and forth, carrying their baggage, carrying just, themselves saying, being tyrants and terrorists,
Mhm.
back and forth. They get in trouble here, it gets too hot, they go back there.
Mhm.
They're not wanted there, they gotta come back down here. So that's what I mean, like it's a spider webbing effect. Even one person represents 10 more individuals that they're affecting. And those individuals have families that are being affected.
And part of it is the city here doesn't do a good job of working with our communities to
100%.
figure out how to continue to support these
Well,
folks.
and
or
it's
to
the
put it out.
inefficiency of service providers.
Yeah.
Absolutely, 100%. I would say like we had an independent audit from a third party to come in and measure success through service providers, all of them. And the average score with their KPIs was a 20% functioning at 20% of their mission. So yeah, that's what I mean. Like we, even if we know what the reasons are, I think we've got a pretty good list going. The answer to it all is not adequate right now. Our response to that, we're not even capable of really responding in a broad scale at this point.
ACEH to me, being the statewide continuum of care epicenter, should be, that's what they should be doing. They should have a global footprint, and instead, they are almost just focused on doling out money.
What they should be doing is technical support.
Yeah, technical support, not trying to be the service provider.
100% agree. Yeah, so what you gotta look at is like, what is the standard, how did they become the continuum of care? And what is their mission? And then look what they've been doing. Because one of the things is like, they always say they're not service providers, but to me, it seems like there's a lot of services being provided through them. So there's a kind of a conflict there.
Yeah,
I feel like they're diverting money that should be going more toward, they're so top heavy. They need to take that money and put it actually into agencies like Henning Inc. or, the Rural Cap or feeding.
You raise a good point. Look at the operation budgets of every organization. That's something we did. And literally across the board, it's 20 to 30% of the money that trickles down to individuals.
Yeah.
And the rest of the bulk of the money goes to operational costs and salaries.
Out of
And you-
$2.1
all of that-
million,
all
it
that's
was not
available. All of that data
800,000,
is
and then it went to
readily
1.7, and went to 770,000.
And I'm not saying that, I'm saying that across the board, and I'm not saying to toot our horn, because if you look at our executive leadership, there's only two.
yeah.
There's only two people, and I know I don't make over $100,000 a year. But if you look at other organizations, you look at the top, their executive directors, and it's just super top heavy. So how can you be efficient
Yeah.
monetarily? And then if you have a bunch of brick and mortar asset,
Well, if it
what's your if you solve homelessness, what's going to happen to your asset?
So how do we measure whether or not ACEH is doing a good job? What are some things that we can measure them by?
I think that you look at their if you look at it from pure economics, you look at their operations budget, see how much money is flowing through.
And where is it going?
They're terribly inefficient. And they're wasting money.
Call it wasting. But, the other thing too, I've spent a lot of time with the 4-acre group and doing my grant writing classes and stuff. It is very typical that nonprofits have at least 70% of their income goes to those types of salaries, which is really a shame. It's not efficient. Michelle, I'm just going to email you these so they can be included.
Rob, I got a question for you. When you guys do outreach, I mean, I know you do outreach, I know ACEH does outreach. When I see Anchorage Coolest and Homelessness, they always are out in a parking lot, someone just handing stuff out. And you never get out walking the trails or the parks?
They don't. I mean, we haven't done a lot of trail walking. And I mean, we do that like individually, we get out there, but because we run the shelters,
Right.
we typically have been focused on that. And actually, the coalition had a grant for outreach that they were supposed to put out for a bid. It just never happened.
Yeah, I saw where they wanted volunteers.
Right. So
They wanted the numbers, we wanted other people to provide the numbers, and
I think how we let's bring accountability has to be pure economically speaking, and say like, this is how much money have you utilized? Where can we trim the fat at? Like seriously, because there's no other indicator that's going to show discrepancies, except like funding, economics. Numbers never lie. Like, you know, when we put up, you know, the information that they provided, that's $100 per day, compared to the information we provided, which is $60 per day. There's no argument there. You can't refute that because we've operated for 2 years under that measure.
well,
How much money have you spent? What are the performance results of what you've spent? And where can we trim the fat?
Yeah.
And it really is that ACEH. I mean, right there is a big place where you can trim a lot of money. They don't need, ACEH needs maybe 3 people. A person that is
a grant writer.
makes
It used to be like that.
a politicking person. You need one who is sort of your coordinator of all the resource people, and you need another person who is making sure that the technical data piece is there. So you have one person that's just managing the relationship with all the providers and making sure that they all have what they need, holding meetings, making sure they're on the same page. One person's doing the data, sharing that back out to all those providers, and then one person that's out seeking money to bring money in, whether it's writing grants for the coalition or and giving the reports back to everybody that's sent money, reporting back, like saying, this is what we've done. And they don't need anything else.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people they have over there now.
My hope is that
I think there are 11.
As we get deeper into, you know, all the stuff that we're doing with our other group, that's what we're just trying to bring forth is fiscal responsibility when it comes down to it, because obviously it's not enough what we're doing. We need more work, we need better work, and we can't do that if we're
Terrence, I've
spending
taken
out of
pictures
control.
to give to
Our
Michelle.
spending's terrible.
So if you want to erase and do a thing on the fiscal responsibility or ACEH.
I'm gonna take pictures too, just
Oh,
so I
are you?
have it on my phone.
Yeah, okay.
Well,
I've been over, and I know that Terry has as well, the 990 for ACEH. And it's absolutely shocking that we bring in, that they're giving $2.1 million in 2020, and their salaries were $800,000, and approximately 40,000 went to the homeless, 48,000 went to paper products and office supplies. In 2021, the income went from 2.1 down to 1.7 million, and the wages went from 800,000 to $770,000, with only 58,000 going to the actual services for the homeless. Now, I might not totally understand that, but in layman's terms, and again, 48,000 for paper supplies, that's not okay. And they
where are these numbers
from the 990, the taxes.
Yeah, and I think some of those things you were saying, the $58,000 was
Those were
public relations thing.
Public relations, and let's not just forget.
What year was that 990?
It was either 2020
and 2021. I've got it right here, and I will forward it to our secretary. Here's the thing: the problem with, and that's why.
This is the 990 from ACEH.
Yes.
Okay.
The
Well, I
problem,
think that's the kind of relevant stuff.
but it's
when we're talking
normal.
about-
According to the 4-acre group, who is very specific, they do a lot of the grants, they do a lot of the training here for the state. They give
But here's
presentations.
but Foraker Group is leftist, and I've been trained by the Foraker Group a million times. I hold a nonprofit executive management certificate from Foraker. But the Foraker Group is leftist. They're also fully funded by the Rasmussen Foundation. Foraker Group is going to defend a leftist organization like ACEH.
That's right.
But there are some changes, like Rasmussen, they stopped all their granting.
Yeah.
They put a pause on everything. They started a housing homelessness branch.
Uh-huh.
They got new people there.
At where?
At Rasmussen.
Rasmussen.
Oh yeah,
And so
they stopped the flow.
Yeah, they cut it off a little bit to reorganize.
I just think that it's hard to get, and Foraker is an awesome organization. They provide great training. There's a lot of things they do that are exceptional, right? They come in and provide a lot of support. The problem is when they're funded by an organization that tends to be on a political scale far left,
Or-
and you have ACEH, which is run by a lot of people ideologically on a political level, far left. And Foraker Group tends to, and is getting its resources from the far left. And you see a lot of the functions they're filling can be left-leaning. It's hard to say, unless you have some kind of a balance in that evaluation of what they're saying, you have to take that with a grain of salt. The 990, it doesn't pass the red face test.
No.
When a nonprofit is raising money for the homeless, but then it doesn't put any money, when it only puts 10% of those funds to the homeless. I had a tribe.
It's like 4%.
My tribe, for example, in the early 2000s, received about $300,000 a year in federal funding, and it was spending about 70% of that on the council and administrative services, and 30% of that money was going to the tribal members in services. And it took about 4 years to reverse that, to get it to where it was right-sized, where only about 15% was going to. We see this happen when the left gets in control of things like the VPSO program. When Governor Parnell, prior to Governor Parnell, the VPSO program in the state only allowed 15%. There was a cap. You could only use 15% on administrative costs. And the rest of it, if you're going to manage this program, you got to figure out where that was. What happened was some of the regions of Alaska are a little more expensive to operate a program like that. And they would have a need to go up to 28% as an exception. But the state, being lazy, said, we're going to change this and we're not going to put a percentage on it. We're going to just allow you to tell us what you need for administrative costs. Well, quickly that accelerated, and now the average, you have places claiming 47, 48% for administrative costs on a program. So when the legislature gives $100,000 per VPSO, $47,000 is going to run the program, and $53,000 is going for the VPSO and all of his benefits. And it doesn't make sense. It's what we're doing with homelessness. We're applying a small portion to the people in the services. It's like we're doing education. Once you get government involved with it, and ACEH is an extension of government. Right now, they're an extension of the legislative branch because Meg is there. And to an extent, they're an extension of the executive branch because the money oftentimes flows through the mayor's office to them.
Yes.
And so you have two branches of government funneling money, and they're acting as an agent of government. They are, because they've been identified by HUD. You're the agent,
Continuum of care.
and that's the continuum of care.
There's also, just as if you're talking about money, the other thing that I noticed, Terry pointed out, there was the budget, that page you sent me to the one time, the budget.
Which one?
I go to the muni, and then go to assembly, and then you go down like to the third line to budget, and
Was it the
yes,
uh,
yeah. So there was,
budget adjustments and tax levies?
yes,
That's coming back up in a special meeting Friday.
uh-huh. And
The
what's
30th.
amazing is that I think it was $2.3 million went to the First Presbyterian Church. And I don't understand why.
Oh, that was
What
that was
was,
part of the Rasmussen Foundation Fund. The Muni granted them some money, and I think they gave that back to the First Presbyterian Church to buy the church. That was Reverend Schultz.
but I know he gets a lot of the money because I've been in here for muni meetings, and it makes me wonder what nonprofit entities.
I can tell you, right, there's enough data out there to do a cost analysis, a solid cost analysis.
So I think maybe we need a list of priorities. Number one, we need to recommend, I think one of our number one recommendations should be that any nonprofit that is servicing our community should have a cap on salaries or an even match, that it cannot exceed that which it gives out to the people provided services. That absolutely, you have to
Fiscally responsible.
Right, be fiscally responsible. You can't be taking in so much money and filling the pockets of the people who already have jobs when you're trying to help people who have no jobs. They have no jobs, no food, no clothing.
And they're dying on the street.
And they're dying on the street while these people are making
And that's what I'm saying, like,
$300,000.
if-
It's baloney.
Like, you look at different operations, you can look at our operations, it's super small.
Yep.
Super small, but we.
And super super transparent too.
Yeah,
You guys are
it is.
super transparent. When you're not transparent, there's a problem.
Well, I'm just saying, when you're able to have a small operation, you're not top heavy, and you're not worried about, about your operations budget.
I feel like the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness has a monopoly on all of the HUD funding, which
do.
actually could, instead of coming into ACEH, if those grants were equally given to other entities such as Henning or somebody else, you guys got a grant writer or something, we could actually distribute more services to meet the needs of the people. Does that make sense?
Well, it's funny because the HUD grants, most of them end 2025.
Well, that's why Meg's
Yeah,
not
this
running
year.
again.
But that puts another 250 people out on the streets other than what we are letting loose now. That's the end of the year.
Yeah.
I've
So
actually-
you gotta look at like, budget, they
There
haven't
are,
even finished their budget reviews for what, 2022, 2023?
No, it doesn't happen till May.
So, that's the thing you wanna look at, if you're talking about fiscal responsibility, being able to digest that information. Like, I can't digest that information, but
we
I have
need
people that
an
can.
accountant, Terrence. We need an accountant to look at the 990s for the top, don't even name them, just the top 5 nonprofits involved in helping homelessness. We need an accountant to look at that. Sorry, Rob, you might get caught in there, but it
That's fine.
I know it is. I know it is. I
We'll do
absolutely
better
know
than
that.
Yeah.
But if we had somebody look at that to see whether or not we are using our money wisely, I guess you could say.
What did you write? HUD funds to?
HUD funds to recipients versus, meaning like Hennings,
Right.
versus to ACEH,
Or,
or
Yeah.
Muni. Because HUD can do it. HUD can grant the funds directly. The Muni needs to take a position to support that. If government truly believes that it isn't supposed to be, its role is not to get in the way of trying to be the homeless solver. We have all these organizations that were created to solve homelessness, and somehow you have 3 people sitting on the 8th floor that come in and out every 3 years, that they're now the expert of homelessness. It's not. That's the problem. The other is to think that someone from the legislative branch goes and applies. What was her skill set that put her over there? She was an attorney, okay? But what does that have to do with homelessness and managing homeless organizations? Nothing. So what was your expertise? You've come in to know a lot about homelessness. You can regurgitate the data, but no one has ever said, here are the expectations, Mag, and you're not meeting those expectations. Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness. That the end is the big part of that word, and we're not ending it, we're exacerbating it. And that's what I think.
on the 17th, at that meeting, and I actually have, I have some of the data. I asked for it from somebody in the thing. Let me see the report. It's the Housing and Homelessness Committee meeting that was Wednesday, April 17th. There was some documentation for the Anchored Home thing. The Anchored Home project was actually done in 2018.
Yeah.
So you got something in 2018 and you got something, that they're touting now. Guess what the difference is in those 2 programs, which said that they were gonna end homelessness in like a year to 2 years. They did it in 2018, it didn't work because they didn't apply it right. So anybody who was involved in 2018 should be out the door and not involved in 2024 because it's 6 years later. And what'd you do? All they did was change the date on that report. They didn't do anything.
So another problem that I ran into while at the health department was that when you would refer people to the coalition, they didn't even know where to refer people. I called to make 5 separate referrals. They didn't even know where to refer them. They would suggest that maybe I call this organization or that organization. I'd call those organizations. And they say, we don't take referrals like that. You need to come in to the place. Well, the person is in a bad situation and they don't even have transportation to get to you, and they're not gonna come in to your place of work. How do we get them referred? So then someone said, well, I don't know, maybe call Nancy Burke. So I called Nancy. And on multiple times that she came over to the office, a couple times, we had these conversations. That even then, having face-to-face contact with her to refer people, it was really difficult to get people referred. And even when she would get involved, the ball would get dropped every time, even when she was hand-holding the situation. So then to think that the only time it was successful was when Rob was going through the halls of the Aviator, walking people. Literally. That was the only time I saw success. Because I would try it with Nancy, and even that was supposed to be the direct conduit, and it didn't work. So to think, no wonder why it's not working.
It was crazy to me because, I was new to this.
Yeah.
And I was just like, this is the best we have. Like, we don't have a system in place to successfully assess somebody and provide intervention and transition. None of that. So that's kind of what we're here, because there's nothing in place. Like Henning, we got in because it was an emergency situation.
Yeah.
And so we just actually kind of.
But you happen to be equipped with the right tools and knowledge.
People, and people with lived experience.
And the lived experience is, I think that's another priority here. Understand the lived experience. And
They did say that in the meeting. I will give them credit for saying that.
okay, but none of them have the lived experience, and the ones that do, they keep them at arm's length away.
They did not even invite any of us to the meeting. That's what shocked me.
This
I was
whole-
like,
this-
I found out it was a fluke.
What meeting?
It was on the 17th. You were there. It was a good meeting.
That was here.
And they said,
Yeah,
this is
I
very
watched them.
important. We have to
Yeah, it's only
understand the
15
lived
minutes.
experience,
And
but they
yet
did not invite any of
Yet
us.
they don't come to this meeting,
No.
right? They don't involve, and I think that's
And that's exactly why I'm saying, like, all this work to go into somebody that
It's not going
don't
to
really care to listen.
Well,
So-
that's what we show up.
But that's what we show up and tell them. I
Yeah.
mean, these are kind of, that's the message.
Yeah.
You're looking for someone's lived experience. You have a board that Felix himself was here for a long time, and then he just quit coming.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that was a conduit, direct
Right.
conduit to the
Sure.
center. And now they're not here.
Yeah.
So when they don't come, then it's just, it shows the erosion or undermining of what you say out of one side of your mouth and your actions on the
Sure.
other. They don't match up.
Right.
They have and then also when ACEH holds at a distance, Henning,
Yeah.
and says, you're way out here, that's the model. The model is, we have one that works, yet we're gonna keep pushing. Why? Because it's an ideological solution and it becomes political because of the relationships.
Take the politics out. That should be one of the priorities. We should be taking the politics out.
Take the politics out, the emotions, and come at it with science and data.
Take the
and
profiteering out of it too.
Yeah.
We need, in order to do that, that's under fiscal responsibility. Take profiteering out by leveling the amount that can come in for wages versus the amount that goes out for services. If those are not
Well,
balanced,
I think if you.
we will never make progress.
If you go at it, you go at the CFOs. You put your CFO hat and say, listen, these are the numbers here. This is the percentage of services, this is the percentage of operation budget, this is the percentage of wages. Does this make sense to you? And you make them answer that question. Make them answer that question.
That's a really good question. We're gonna need a recording of this.
Percentage of direct ops.
Versus the percentage of pay
Wages.
or wages
overhead.
or overhead. Yeah.
Like however you want, but make them to look at that. Like, listen, this is we're in a crisis for a reason, and we've got to be fiscally responsible to solve it. And all we're asking is for everybody to right-size things. Simple as that. We've got some, and I think, when we meet with Ryan and everybody, we've got some data that we can contribute.
Good, okay.
Yeah.
I love these work sessions. We get so much more done.
Much better.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry,
this just
Norma.
allows us to get the stuff on. I think it's kind of part of a continuation of your guys' conversation.
Yeah.
And that had to kind of go through iterations and
Sure.
discussion, right, for days.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it helps us because we are in this group, where we're positioned differently than what your presentation was this morning, is we are appointed from the city to
Yep.
see the political side of this and how can we advise them. Because
Gotcha.
ultimately, this group advises both the mayor and the assembly as to what to do. And even if you told them from a private sector perspective,
It's completely
we
different.
can reiterate, but we can also push other buttons
Mhm.
and levers and say, look, this is what we think. It can have some derivatives. Not everything ACH has done has been bad, and not everything the Muni has done has been bad. But what they've not done that's not been good is they still exclude a lot of the public from solutions. When they have the dialogue, like they've had town halls where citizens can come and speak and vet out, they don't follow up. So people speak their minds and they vent, and then the city does no follow-up. They don't summarize those meetings. They don't take the work that you do on the streets. There's nobody in the mayor's office or in ACEH or the assembly that says, we have seen these videos, they are alarming. There's nobody from APD that calls you up and says, where's that camp? Why? Because it's not on their radar. Why isn't it on their radar? They should know everything that goes on. As much as we know about what you do, they know nothing about what you do. And, the key is, I think, when we get our chance to speak in front of the assembly, we need to have photographs and current information so that we can say, this is what the Anchorage Police Department and the Coalition to End Homelessness and the Mayor's Office and all the service providers are ignoring. This and this and this and this health issue and this safety issue and this concern and this. And when the calls come in, and then say, in addition, when APD is called with these kinds of things, this is what doesn't happen. And say, here's an incident, here's an incident, here's an incident. And say, why isn't this happening? There's an executive decision that's not being made. There's a legislative decision not holding people accountable. You're just pushing money. And we get to say that.
Well, why don't we, so that is a really good point, and that's one of the reasons that we've been taking videos. We put together just a short, like 2-3 minute video of the environmental damage and hazards, the crime and hazards, and that, the difference between last year and this year, Terrence, is last year we would go out and walk the camps and people would be like, oh, and they go over here and they would hide it. We went to a camp last week.
Oh, Cuddy is wide.
And
wide
no,
open.
they're just gonna light it up. They're
Yeah,
gonna smoke
yeah.
their heroin and their fentanyl right there in front of you.
Oh, yeah.
They don't care.
Yeah.
They don't care.
Yep.
They're gonna drop their drawers right in front of you and take a crap. And it's right in the middle of our city park.
Oh, we got one behind Tudor Elementary.
So we
Yeah.
used to,
It's
as
what?
law enforcement, we used to,
Not even
when you
thousands.
saw somebody having in a mental situation that wasn't healthy, you Title 47 them.
Yeah.
And you bring them in. They don't even do that now.
No.
They just leave
They
them.
won't.
No.
Now's probably a good time to mention and put on record what I was told by a general manager of Lithia Motors. And that was, and Lithia, has all of Old Seward. They've got multiple shops. So they have multiple issues. They had people that were homeless coming in. There was a guy got into the back of a car and he didn't use the door and he didn't use the lock. He broke in through a window, crawled in and was sleeping in the back of a car with a half bottle of alcohol. The GM was called in the middle of the night, went down there, had to talk to the cops, and the cops were like, well, what do you want us to do? And he said, well, arrest him. They said, we don't see any laws that are broken. Really? He's like, the guy, instead of them questioning the person in the back of the car, they were running up the GM saying, well, we don't see it. And the guy's like, okay, the broken window's right here. And they're like, oh, well, so what do you want us to do? Arrest him. He's like, no. The cops were like, we don't really, they didn't want to do it, which seemed crazy
It's not a choice for the cop to make those calls. It's not within their authority. It's within the, if they don't get to waive off or on a criminal charge.
But they
When you
do.
have criminal trespass, criminal mischief, both of those, depending on the cost, that window was over over $1,000. So you have those two crimes right there.
And then there's damage inside the
Call
car.
the judge but they have to hook them up. They have to call the judge, and if they're going to release them on their own recognizance, they can't if they're inebriated because they are they're
A
unsafe.
danger, right?
So and if
But
you,
the point is that the businesses that are providing a tax revenue for the city, providing something solid and clean for our city, are not being helped to maintain their businesses, and it's having a tertiary
here's where the
expense for
accountability
us.
is. If taxpayers are paying money, if that business is paying money, and they're not getting the service from the agencies that we're giving the money to provide the service, then those businesses need to protest paying their taxes, but to the entity, do it legal. They need to protest it. They need to speak out. The general manager needs to speak out.
Well, we're waiting on a call back. I'm hoping to get the actual owner of Lithia, because they are considering a potential decrease in the businesses that they have here in the community, which is a huge amount, because they can no longer actually file a claim on any damages over $20,000. So if they've got damages that are over $20,000, if they just totally ruin a car, they can't claim it on insurance,
So
because the insurance company is saying, we're out, man.
how do we
I don't
get
know.
how do we get a hold of this person? It'd be great to have the conversation with them before.
The next meeting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just call them up.
Well, I can shoot you the GM's number, and I'm hoping that he can get you in touch with the owner. I don't know if the people are willing to talk.
I'd like to just say, hey, are you open
Yeah.
to, I don't
Have
want
it
the whole
short.
story, have them put it on the record,
Yeah,
and then take that to step two is put it on the record again when we take it to the assembly meeting, and that be another point on the record. There's just so many of these. I mean, I had someone on the streets attack my vehicle, never had a follow-up from APD. I had to ask the municipal manager to have the chief or the assistant chief call me because I couldn't get any answers. They called me and said, hey, what happened? And I said, I'm sitting here, no one ever called me back. My car is full of scratches and blood, and I
Right.
want to know what the heck happened. And did you guys contact them? No. And they were attacking all kinds of vehicles right in front of the jail. And there was an APD car parked in there. And then said, oh, I'll have someone call you back. And then it never happened again. And that was in 2022.
That was a drug psychosis.
Just,
incident, a zombie type.
So
Yeah.
what happens firsthand, and we experienced it.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to several businesses around the peanut farm, and like high frequency, the peanut farms, other places, no one will come and talk. The guy at Don Jose's will run the lights. The owner got
Yeah.
stabbed last year.
Oh
Stabbed
yeah,
twice.
you know how we have DUI task forces?
Mm-hmm.
We need a task force that does the bike trails, it goes into the camps,
I mentioned that to the mayor.
and they need to refocus their priorities.
Yeah, because I mean, last year there were hundreds of camps around these bike trails,
Yeah,
and a lot of them are not safe to be in.
yeah.
No,
I'm
not
not
very
safe.
Oh well,
pleasant.
we were actually on the bike trail by Minnesota and Diamond.
Yeah.
Remember that? And we
That's,
had them scream and yell.
Ravina Park.
They attacked us.
Yeah. I've seen.
We were walking.
Attacked us.
I've
You and I
seen-
were walking on the bike trail, remember? And they were yelling, yelling at us.
Yeah, they were.
We're
I've
on
seen
the
several
street.
attacks right in that area.
Yeah.
Guy comes out of the woods with a big piece of log,
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
chasing two kids.
Oh, no. We shouldn't stand for this anymore.
That kind of stuff, because they're gonna walk by the wrong person, that's
We wanna
gonna
enjoy
take
our
them on.
life.
I don't
It's
I
scary.
don't travel to camps without being armed. I mean, I'm not gonna pull unless I have to. I'd rather use an Arcan on if I have to, but yeah, I'm scared out there every once in a while.
Do you take Narcan when you go?
Yeah, I got like 5 or 6 boxes now, people keep donating it. Had to use a couple last year.
Well, even APD had resisted for a long time. Maybe it was the union, but APD didn't wanna give their officers Narcan.
Why? It's simple, it's cheap.
Because they'd have to train them. They'd
Have to
have
train
to
'em
do
and-
some training.
Narcan is easy training.
Right, I know, I got the training too, and I
So
didn't.
bad.
Just remember to stand back
Stick-
behind their head when you give it to them.
Stick it in their nose.
Yeah.
Yeah, they got the
No,
one.
the thing that scares me is walking the camps up by Muldoon. You look at all the drug use up there, and there is tons and tons of empty Narcan containers.
Yeah.
So they're
overdosing and
and then
staying
bringing themselves
alive.
back and going back under again.
Yeah, I've got some really good videos from this last fall when we did
Yeah, I've got them all.
Davis Park. Actually, I think I did that one alone, where they were actually asking us for Narcan because they could not wait till the new blue came out because it was supposed to be coming out in a week, and it was like more powerful, 20 times more powerful. The other thing that we have to consider with this is the current cartel infiltration of our city. And I can tell you from personal experience, it is substantial. They've already taken 130 pounds off of the streets. When we disperse all these people and send them out and away, what are we doing to current investigations where they're tracking people and getting ready to either bust them or take them in? There's a new level of danger just on top of the drugs because a large portion of this distribution network, they're not safe at all. I mean, in my case, you guys know that my situation where my daughter's part of that group that's been arrested. And yes, I did help put her into jail because it's the right thing to do. I want these drugs off the street. But there were 2 people that were killed, possibly 3. And they threatened to kill my daughter. They had to remove her from this state in order to protect her. And she's part of the distribution. So the level of impact that has had on our homelessness is huge. The other thing, when we walked the camp over at Willowa, was it? When they had those girls walked up?
Yeah, it was Willowa Park. They're back there.
Huge. I mean, we actually witnessed 2 or 3 girls locked up in a camp. They'd taken a basketball court down, put it around their campsite, and had them locked in
Yeah, they were
with a
locked in.
padlock. And then every time we showed up,
But
we'd walk through.
She said she wasn't being held hostage.
But
We asked her.
they don't say that. So what they basically do is when we walk through the camp, there's just the 2 girls there. They've set up trail cams and they've set up a notification system where on our way back out, then there's a couple of
That's
people
when
that,
APD needs to come in and
Yeah.
say,
Well, I witnessed a sexual assault out there the day of the big shooting of the 3rd Avenue with Davis Park and with the other. I mean, a sexual assault right in front of me. I called APD, but they were busy on the call to the shooting.
yeah, well, there's,
They did show up Johnny on the spot to the stabbing down above the railroad station though. We walked up there and they
I think
So dangerous.
it
out
hit so
there.
hard, like after
is dangerous.
COVID, we weren't ready. We were not ready. We weren't doing a good job as it was.
well, what happened? What was the one thing unique about COVID? A massive influx of money
Yeah.
came into the city when it comes to the biggest epicenter, and we were handing money out left and right.
Yep.
Anybody and everybody came here. We received about the majority of all the homeless people in the state came
Yeah.
here.
Well, the FEMA dollars, yeah. So the funny thing is when I'm looking at the Houston model, like, great, they did a good job, but when they came and presented, I looked and all I saw was that they did good with their money. They took their money and did good with it. That's what I was like. So basically, the Houston model is what we're doing, but with money. What Haiti's doing, but with money,
and we've already wasted our money.
right.
Okay.
I heard something about the city's pretty much broke for spending on homeless problem.
She mentioned.
How's that gonna affect everybody?
That's why you got to be on the cutting edge of what you need to do for innovation wise.
Right.
Automate like a lot of different things that can be automated so that you can focus on services.
Yeah.
And that's the thing.
That's not what's
the
happening.
The existing structure as it is. It's just an old model. It's an old, dated model that's top-heavy, hierarchical system. We need these circular models that have leaders and coaches doing a lot of the work that, the executives would be doing, and that way it's just more cost effective, just from an economic and then lived experience, people that.
So, I'm gonna throw something out to you that it takes a little bit to pull this together and orchestrate it, but it can be very effective. Back in 2016, 2017, a group of us got together, citizens, and we were frustrated about how much money the state was spending. So we decided that it was gonna be up to us to try to solve the problem of state spending. And we started this project and called it Mission Critical. And it was just citizens. And then pretty soon it became attorneys and CPAs and legislators and people that are in politics, some not in politics. And this group started to grow. And everybody collaborated like this, bringing stuff together. And a couple of principals, myself was one, we began pulling this stuff together. And we just started with funds out of our pocket. And we began sharing this with people. We'd hold meetings. And the first couple of meetings had about 50 people in them. And because we were sharing snapshots of what we had done. We'd done a performance audit on the state of Alaska and showed where all the money was being wasted and all publicly available information.
Yeah.
And showed how to solve the problem. We created the whole thing. And we started getting requests from Kenai, in Fairbanks, in Juneau,
And that's
in
exactly.
Bristol Bay, and we went out and we were hitting 50 to 100 people at a time. Pretty soon, it led to us doing the library or the museum. We had to rent the theater out, pack the theater. It was getting so much criticism from state government officials that the troopers actually would come and listen. I was a trooper at the time, would come and listen to see how much I was going to throw them under the bus so they could come and chase me around, because I was pointing out where the Department of Public Safety was wasting money.
Yeah.
And I said, look, if you're telling the truth, you can't fault yourself, not me.
Right.
And we'd go through legal, and they said they can't tell me to not talk about stuff that's accurate, that you find. But needless to say, the project was a grassroots where there were a lot of people involved. And my thinking is this: we have a lot of stuff. You've got a lot of stuff, got a lot of stuff, people are interviewing, there's news, and there's a ton of frustration around it. But the conversation doesn't get presented outside of assembly meetings to the public, like in a forum where they get to hear it for 90 minutes from different perspectives, graphs and slideshows and presentation. And we were razzle-dazzling folks with facts about things that when they would walk out of it, even 5 years later, working in the legislature, people would come through the senator's office where I was working, and they'd say, man, I remember you from Mission Critical, because we were traveling all over state on our own time, and we would ask for donations. And people would give $3, $5, $10, whatever they could. And it would just pay our gas to get up to where we were going.
Yeah.
And we were still covering some of our costs, but we were raising about $2,000 every time we'd have one of these things because people believed in it. I think this is something people believe in. We don't have to ask for money, but I do think we need to organize the Wilda Marston and put formal things up. We need to do the museum
And get the public
hold
input.
our own town halls
Yeah.
where
Yeah,
we are the ones doing it. We
So
put
what
together
you-
the presentation.
That's absolutely true. So how you would do that is if you, so a couple months ago, we had this event where Derek Moore, a good friend of mine who was incarcerated and found a way out, he's doing amazing, and he just did he shared his story. So what you do is you get somebody that wants to share their story to the public, how they
We built this into the whole presentation.
Exactly.
They get some facts, they get some anecdotal, they get some
lived experience.
lived experience. We give them, but we walk them through the problem, confronting the issues, pointing out the problems, calling spades, and then giving them a solution. Like, here's the solution. And then what happened was people wanted to get armed with the solutions, and we gave them to them. What we were pointing out, so an example was when we would talk about how we were fleecing the state, we pointed out things like the state carries over 3,000 fully funded unfilled positions, which is the percent of, we're at about a 9% vacancy rate, when 1.5% is normal in an organization, and they're using it as a slush fund. And it's to the 300 million, but they're taking your PFD to do it. Or we say, did you know the last 60 days of every legislative session, the state of Alaska becomes the largest purchaser of furniture in the world? Because it's a use it or lose it money.
Yeah.
Is $60 million acceptable when you're having
CITC was
budget
just
cuts
like that
and they're
too.
telling you you have to have a small PFD?
New
No.
TVs, new desks.
Yeah, do you want us, did you know that the state of Alaska is funding a rocket program in the South Siam Sea? Why are we doing that? And people were going, what? And so you just kept going down this list, and so it helped them to say, they're telling us they can't give us a PFD, and this is the stuff they're not troubleshooting, and it was all stuff they could do, and they'd say, well, who's responsible? Well, the governor and the governor and the legislature and the governor and the legislature, and you start pointing it, and we also went through all the departments and found efficiencies. So we can redesign this model, like you've got the model, right? We redesign it, you've got the evidence, we've got the story, and we provide the solution. And I think we go and we put a presentation. Pretty soon we started inviting leaders in the communities. We had legislators start buying on. Anybody that was running for office started. People will come for the resource of information.
Yeah.
The purpose isn't to shame people, but the
No,
purpose
it's
is
to
to fix the
right-size-
problem.
Right size everything.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I think like if we focus on just what you're doing, exactly what you're bringing out, like the problems, and then we can focus on the solution of what.
Yep. So, and we could phase it to say, here's this, now we want to present to you what the solution looks like. And then boom, you can come up and paint this picture and say, we've already painted what it looks like now, where it's broken. You hear some of these examples of people coming out of that.
This is
Now
what
we're gonna,
doing
here's
now.
what the solution looks like.
Yeah.
And then we build it, and then you can come back. It can be done, and it can be done really cool.
Absolutely.
And
No,
you,
even
the
just from the response of the people that came today to just to the,
Our presentations, when we time them, were done, we would try to hold it to like 45 minutes.
Yeah, we were done in 45 minutes and had a
The
half
question,
hour.
yeah, the question and answers would often go longer,
Yeah.
but we would keep it succinct, we had a process for it. But we talked about everything, and we can talk about everything, things that we wouldn't normally bring up, it led us to other conversations, and we talked about things like education, and how that system was broken. I mean, we can talk about how ACEH, how the system of what we're doing with ACEH is broken.
Right.
And this is what you need to demand that we change.
Yeah,
And-
that's it. It's the system.
When
We
you
don't
go
even- we
to
don't
a
even have to
This
say
is a
it's-
system
we
and
don't even
process
say it's
problem,
the
most of this is
Right.
system problem.
when you go to a lawmaker, you
Exactly.
cannot just go there with a problem.
We-
You have to go there with a proposed solution, because if they give you the solution without your input, it is going to be
And
ACEH,
problem
it
is
will
that
not work.
they are all politicians, and so to their fault, they're seeing things from one paradigm,
Right.
right? And to shift that paradigm, you have to give them another systemic replacement with new processes to show them where it can be fixed, because they can't see it. Most of them help create what we have,
Right.
so to get
They
them
were,
out
they were
of
like
that,
doing the best they could. They feel like if you're infringing on this, then
they're
I'm
invested
bad.
in it. They're
I'm bad.
highly
Right.
invested in it, right?
Right.
And they think that we're in a better place now than if they hadn't done anything.
Right.
And
That's
so.
not good enough anymore.
No, it's what they were trying to do a long time ago was good in a snapshot of time,
Right.
and today is a different. I
And
mean,
that's exactly what the message needs to be. It's like we just have an outdated system that
Yeah.
does not apply.
completely. You guys are in 2019.
Yeah.
And 2019 solution you were proposing was San Francisco 2009,
Right.
Yeah.
which was LA 2003.
Exactly.
And you are taking an LA 2003 model, and you're ignoring the San Francisco 2009,
And the
and
problems
you're
that
ignoring
they
the
had.
Portland and Seattle 2016, 15, 16, and you're applying it today in 2024 in Anchorage, and they're all telling you it's not working, and you see it by what's going on there, and you aren't shifting gears to make the adjustment.
Not only that, you,
So yeah, if we under that, and it's a community engagement, that's a completely different story. That's because I could like all this that the presentation we're trying to do that. Yeah, maybe we can go talk to the assembly about it, but the real nectar, the real juices would be somewhere at the library.
Hey,
like,
we had,
that type of.
so with this grassroots thing that we did with the budget, right? We had probably close to 2,000 people statewide calling and emailing and stuff that was happening. And this will resonate, because I bet you we could find a way to deliver this, going out to a couple of rural communities, delivering it, and talking about, I know a couple of mayors in some of these places where we could bring them back in to say, why aren't you asking us for help? Why aren't you bringing us into the fold? Why aren't you, and having them be a part of the conversation?
Well, and we can't continue to demand that those people in need meet us when we are ready, or the community. We need to meet them where they are at, because there is not an addict that I know that will take it when we're ready. If they come to us and ask for help and we don't have those assistances when they hit the bottom,
Yeah.
then we are failing not just them, but we are failing ourselves, because we have an opportunity to help them, but we can't do it. It doesn't work unless they're ready. But if we don't have the stuff ready, again, we're failure. We have to meet them where they are at. They don't get to come to us and say, you know, okay, we'll wait 3 weeks or 3 months. That's not acceptable.
Right.
My daughter should not have been in the situation that she was in, but because when she had her first child, it wasn't there. They did not, I kept asking them, make sure she gets treatment, get her into something treatment. And they're like, oh, well, we can get her an assessment in 3 months. I'm like, I went down there and got the paperwork. But then, you know, you lose her for 2 or 3 weeks because they don't make it 22 stops to the hospital or to treatment. They have to do it then and there. That's why like Tudor and Arctic wasn't gonna work, because all the places for services were so far away. Their next stop is, well, let me just get one more hit before I go to treatment. We've got to meet them where they're at.
The location of the NAV center, you know, where it's at, that was a thoughtful process.
Very.
Because it was across the street from the location where many of the medical services, mental health services were gonna be provided. That was the one positive that came out of all of that work, is when they settled on that location, it was like, yeah, it makes sense, and there's a cross bridge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you
there
got
was
the Gospel Rescue Mission over there serving people. They've got a
Yeah, just down the street was a
And
restaurant.
ACEH is right there that could have
And generally,
provided
in that area was generally
location for something.
unpopulated, right?
Yeah.
That side back over there,
Yeah.
there wasn't people, it wasn't in a neighborhood.
bus line.
But
It's
also
a-
not so removed from other people. They want to be included in the community.
It was on
they
the
don't
bus
want to
line,
be put out into the
There were
world.
so many things, by not having, there's a ton of pluses on that location and having something there. The negatives are, so if I was a devil's advocate on it, saying, okay, this is why it's not gonna work. I never saw a good plan how you were gonna take immediately and take someone who has a criminal record and drug offenses and can't be around kids or women or schools, how you could keep them next to somebody who is just in need, is on the streets and in need, or has an addiction problem. And the other thing was, when they would choose places like the Spenard Rec Center, I kept telling the mayor, you can't do that, because you're about 250 feet
School.
from the school, and if they can't have weapons, drugs, or sex offenders,
They can't go there.
you can't be there. And in neighborhoods, so that location solves the problem for one group of people. Is it the less severe or the most severe? Because I was like, you can't have sex offenders on one side and drug offenders, and then on the other side have women and children or females that may not be sex offenders or violent offenders. It's hard to say that you can put those two together, and that's the only problem that I can see without having two separate locations, two pieces.
Well, yeah,
not on the
I
same
think
campus.
regardless, we need about three locations, three
Well,
scattered
you're right.
sites.
And that doesn't cover everybody.
And that's the, right.
It takes a lot of
And,
people.
and I think, what it does, if we can navigate people through 3 locations, then we can find placement. And at some point, we won't need, 600 will be sufficient.
Yeah.
600 holding space will be super sufficient if we have the outlets from people navigating them to the permanent supportive housing, to the whatever facility, the mental health workforce development facility, housing they need. So that's what it is. It's like, but what we have the only reason why we have jumped on that piece, because the municipality already owns the.
Well, it's one of the three, right? That's step one.
Yeah.
I mean, if you phase into it, and you have a phased concept,
Right.
you know what you can do with what you got.
Right.
And you say, phase 2 is gonna look like this, phase 3 is gonna look like this. Municipality's already invested. They're
Yeah,
already,
and
they're already
it's-
knee deep, right? And
Yeah, and that's the thing, like, if, critical path moving forward is just that, like, if we can take the politics out of that, and even the mistakes, because obviously there was just massive mistakes that were made in that process. But now we're here, we're not any, we have nothing to do with anybody that made the mistakes.
the
We're
service
trying to-
providers couldn't handle the numbers we had back in the day, and just increasing the service providers, because they aren't actually service providers, they're mostly navigators.
Right,
They're mostly all navigators
Right.
in some capacity.
right. And
So-
that's why the peer model works, because we're in this with you. Like, I'm in long-term recovery. They're in long-term recovery. She's in long-term. She's operations director, but she's got 6 years clean.
The big thing is that where money could go is like the golden lion, that whole concept of,
Yeah,
right, for the recovery.
Right.
We put off for years when it was obvious that we needed that. Even the village of Tyonek, the state could come in. The state has a responsibility in part of this, like through the Department of Corrections. Both Clinton and Hyde and Tyonek had come to the Department of Corrections and said, look, we can get your costs per person below what you're paying in your own institutions. You're paying 100 and something per day. We can get you down to $87 a day. They were saying this, right? And we are going to do a recovery process with these folks. We'll screen them. We'll start pulling them out of the correction system to rehabilitate them. They may still have to serve, this be part of their time, but these are the ones that we need to start transitioning, and this is how to do it. They gave these plans. And Clinton and Hyde wanted to do 12 people, and Tyonek wanted to do 18. That's all they were willing to try to do. Say, look, we're not asking for this, just peel a little bit. But there was so much protectionism around that, and nobody could see it. And they were going to do some stuff at the meat processing plant that they had out in the valley for folks in the system. So
there's a meat processing.
there used to be. They used to process meat and do that. There was a butcher. Yeah, and it was get a skill. Get
Is it
trained.
still up?
No, I think that they
No, it tore
closed.
down?
I think it's still up, it's not operational.
Okay.
Yeah, they closed it. But we had actually put in a proposal to put a little more money, about 30 million, into corrections to double the size of the farm out there.
Mhm.
And I almost think that in part of this, proposals ought to come through Henning to the state, to corrections, to public safety, to the
Right.
governor's office. Because if the system here isn't going to do it, then a private entity comes in and says, look, we want to do this, and this is, now the state is going to have a different perspective on it, saying, we can't just identify a particular group, but we are responsible for long-term housing of inmates and those kinds of things, the halfway houses and
Right.
stuff like that. And at least that group of clientele could be a target audience for a certain element of this, because those are the ones that you don't want them getting back into
Yeah,
the
they have a
recidivist cycle.
shot. They have a shot because
Yeah.
they've got some clean time and
Yes.
maybe some motivation
And-
coming out. And so that's what I started a reentry program. We have two different sites that we master lease in safe, sober places, and they are arriving because people in there, they know that
They don't want to go back.
they don't want to
Or
go back.
worse,
They
they're
call
they're
us.
most at risk.
They call us from inside,
Yeah.
calling our people.
They're most
That's nice.
right. They're
Exactly.
most at risk
Right,
for
right.
dying because an addict. Am I right about this, Rob? An addict who's been clean and sober in jail, who gets out, who does not have those
They
supports,
try to get the same.
then they go
same
back and use
dose.
the same dose that they did before they went in, and that's when they die. And that's what's so terrifying about recovery after
Well,
incarceration.
I think
So
part
that's what we're going after. We're definitely going after.
so I think that part of
That's
this
what you want to do with
part of
that.
this
Yep.
part of this public storytelling is we tell these kind of things, we propose it, and it gets wrapped in. We bring in the right audience, the right legislators to hear it, because they're some of the ones that are going to propose in the budget setting process. Now, this cycle we're too late, but we're ahead of the next funding cycle for the next legislature, and.
Well, they just shook some stuff up over at DOC. They got a new program manager for.
Thank God.
Now, who is the commissioner still?
I can't remember, but John Pistonik is
Jen-
the program manager.
Jennifer something.
Oh,
Uh,
yes, Jennifer.
she's on my phone.
Yes, I know who she is. She has worked her way up through that organization.
And her second in command,
Yes, I know her too.
no, it's a
Kelly
guy.
did,
It's
or
a,
Kelly,
no,
there's a guy?
there's a guy, Jennifer Winkleman,
Yeah, Jennifer Winkleman. Yeah.
and then there's a guy, because I had an issue with my daughter, and I'll tell you what, the first time this has ever happened, I said, look, there are people standing outside my daughter's cell threatening to stab her in her pregnant stomach.
We have
Don't
to,
think I wasn't freaking.
we have to be able to show that recidivism coming out without having a solid program like this to help them when they come out is going to cause them to finally make their way to the streets. That's going to take a little bit of data collection. So from 2012 to about 2017, I used to do what you're doing on the streets every day. And I was interviewing people, and I had a clipboard, and I was collecting data, and I had about 50 different data points of things I would talk to people about. And I always kept their identities protected, but I knew them through other means. Sometimes it's just first name, sometimes it was Joe from such and such community, because I was always protecting that side of it. But I was able to collect data, everything from their veteran status to when they first found themselves in a traumatic experience when they were kids, or the things that might have been triggers to what landed them there at age 42 in downtown. And so I was collecting this, and I had, over the course of those years, I talked to 2,000 unique people. It was from 2012 to 2017. And in that and spotty before that. I'd done a little bit, but not a lot. And I started tracking in town where I was contacting them and where they were. I was keeping all that data. I started talking with the university and the GIS folks. We need to collect some of our own data. Either it's observational, like it's not safe to talk to them. It's awkward to talk in some cases. Or it might inflame something to get that. But find out what we can and what we can observe. The idea is that we have to be able to sort through the inadequate data that we're getting from these service providers.
Right.
They don't share that stuff with anybody. They keep it protected.
Yeah.
They can strip names off and share like raw data if they want it, but they don't. It's proprietary. Why? Because they're fighting for funding. It's protection for money. And I think that we have to figure out how, in a reentry type situation, we have to be able to really show the data, the science behind it. And you can, if we collect some of our own data, mix it with what we know we can get from ACH partners.
And getting input from inside, like, okay, so Jacob Wyckoff is Jennifer's second in command for DOC.
Oh, I know Jake.
He is awesome. He actually went. It was like 5 o'clock on like a Friday when I heard this, and I was like panicking.
So Jake used to be out at Palmer, and he used to be at the academy.
Yeah, he actually went to the jail to make sure that my daughter was okay,
I
because
can take off, guys.
yeah, it's
Okay, man.
anyway.
So let's keep doing this though. Work sessions.
Yes,
Yep.
and let's get you back and Terry back, and let's see if we can get. I think we should get somebody from DOC, Jacob.
Yeah.
Because get a couple.
Well, what we'll do is we'll sort of summarize this stuff together before we
Start bringing people in. Yeah, I think we just
we'll flesh this out.
a little bit more, and then when you meet with us over there, bring all those questions, the data questions.
Yeah.
Because Brian has a lot of that stuff.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we can just.
How often are they meeting over there right now?
It's just been random, sporadic, but I think right now, since we got this out the way, the presentation today, then we'll meet next week.
Okay.
We'll definitely meet. But
Can-
Mark will reach out. We'll reach out to you.
Yeah.
We need to be included in some of these meetings, notifications of meetings, because I can't possibly.
If you know that
keep
there's
track
a
of
house, like a homelessness or HAN or something, we'll start going. I need to just look at the meeting website. We'll just cover down. I'll try to look too.
contact
We just been
numbers.
bad about that.
For sure. Yeah. Cool.
And then
See
you
you.
told me to come see it.
Thanks,
See
man.
it anytime.
When is
next
it?
Thanks.
Next
I want to say July.
Okay.
You
Well, I
know,
think we probably ought to wrap up and.
and a proposal.
One quick question for you.
Yeah,
Oh.
let's hear it. Oh, okay, bye.
We're done with the work session.
What?
4:50.
What'd you say, we're off record?
Finish
Oh, okay.
this meeting, but I think we should bring this celebration.
I think we should have another work session, and
Yeah.
if Nina wants to come